Hey, Katie. We have The Clue of the Tapping Heels. We're on chapter 5, Mysterious Key.
Miss Drew, what's the matter?
Mr. Skank cried out.
It's your turn. Dance!
Nancy paid no attention. She dashed across the stage, leaped down the steps, and ran up the center aisle of the auditorium to the main corridor. As she burst through the door and looked down the hallway, she recognized Ned's assailant as the pudgy man who had followed her in the black sedan. He was reeling from a blow Ned had delivered, but the man retaliated with a swift punch that staggered Ned. Seeing Nancy, the intruder ran out of the front door. She hurried after him, but by the time she had covered the distance to the outside of the building, he was not in sight. She knew it was hopeless to try finding him, and disappointedly returned to the corridor. "Ned, what happened?" she asked. "And are you all right?" He smiled grimly.
Yes, that fellow sure delivers a mean uppercut, he says. That's like an upward punch.
Nancy asked Ned why he had left the auditorium so hurriedly. He said that a boy had come down the aisle and handed him a hand-printed note. Ned pulled it from his pocket and gave it to Nancy to read. "You are to get out of the picture. Nancy Drew has another steady now. Come to the corridor and you'll find out."
So it sounds like the note was saying that, like, stop dating Nancy, she has a new boyfriend. Because to go steady is to date someone exclusively. Of course I went to see what it was all about, Ned explained. The pudgy guy let go with a punch and knocked me off balance. But what brought you to the corridor?
"I just happened to see that punch," she replied. "I feel responsible, Ned, and I'm dreadfully sorry."
Ned grinned. "Just as long as you don't have another steady date. I'll forgive you for anything."
Nancy laughed. "Thanks, Ned. Why don't you go to my house and put something on that jaw? Dad can pick me up later."
"Nothing doing. I'll go find some ice water in this building and doctor myself. You go back to rehearsal. That director must be furious."
As Nancy turned to leave, she noticed a key on the floor. "Is this yours, Ned?" she asked.
"No. When I knocked that man down, the key must have fallen out of his pocket."
"It looks like a car key," Nancy said. "The key might lead to your attacker. Ned, will you call the police and ask them to come here?"
"All right."
There was a telephone booth nearby, and he headed for it while Nancy went back to the auditorium. When she returned to the stage, Mr. Skank had some pretty harsh words for her.
He ended by saying, "I don't relish staying here all night, and you've certainly held up the works, Miss Drew."
Before Nancy had a chance to explain, one of the girls in the cast called out, "You don't know it, Mr. Skank, but Nancy's an amateur detective. She probably had to leave in a hurry in connection with some case."
"Is that true?"
the director asked. Nancy nodded, but did not offer any other explanation. Mr. Skank made no further comment about the interruption.
"Do your dance, Miss Drew. Music, please."
Nancy, desiring to make amends for her sudden leave-taking, performed perfectly. Grudgingly, Mr. Skank praised her. The rest of the rehearsal went smoothly. Nancy felt that in her final tap number she had not danced so well as she could. She mentioned this to Ned as they started for home.
"I didn't notice anything wrong," he said. "But if you weren't satisfied, I'm sure it was a combination of weariness and excitement. You've had a big day."
Nancy had to admit that it did seem long, and she was ready for a good night's sleep. When they arrived at the Drew home, Nancy's father was watching a late movie on TV. He looked at Ned and asked,
Were you in an accident? "No, Mr. Drew, but I had a chance to wallop that guy who was following Nancy this afternoon." The lawyer grinned. "Good for you. Did you put him in the hospital?"
"Wish I had," Ned responded, then explained what had happened. Mr. Drew insisted that Ned stay overnight. The young man accepted and said he must be off very early in the morning.
"But I'll be back tomorrow night to take Nancy to the rehearsal," he added.
Hannah Gruen quickly prepared a snack and then announced that she knew just the thing to put on Ned's jaw. She went to get a soothing lotion and soaked bandages in it. "Keep this wet compress on all night, and I guarantee that tomorrow morning you'll look like yourself again," she said. The housekeeper's prediction came true. Breakfast was served early, and Ned showed no effects of his fight with the pudgy man, except for one little black and blue mark on his cheek. Hannah was pleased and said that she had used a homemade remedy of hers that never failed.
Ned smiled. Maybe you should patent it, go into business. Quick cure, quick money. I'll think about it, Mrs. Gruen said, chuckling.
Ned left in a few minutes, and Nancy helped Hannah with some household chores. Then she set off for Berryville in Ned's car. On the way, she stopped at River Heights Police Department to see if the officers had traced the owner of the key she had picked up at the high school. Sergeant Rothman, who was on duty, said that it had been determined it was not a car key, and he doubted that anyone would claim it.
Would you like it back?
He asked Nancy. Yes, I would. She had a strong hunch that the key might lead to something important in regard to the pudgy man. Nancy put the key in her purse and left headquarters. When she arrived at Miss Carter's, Nancy parked Ned's car in front of the garage. Hearing voices inside the building, she called out, "Hi, I'm back." Bess and George greeted her as she stepped into the garage. "How's everything?" Nancy asked. Bess heaved a sigh. "Okay, but I'm so tired of opening cans of cat food. I never want to see another one in my life." "Let me help you," Nancy said. "Suppose you girls take a rest while I serve the cats their breakfast, and you tell me about your evening."
George grinned. "All we can report is a big 0. No thieves, no tappers, no prowlers, no intruders, not even a mouse. How about the rehearsal, Nancy?"
When Nancy finished telling about her eventful evening, the cousins looked at each other in amazement.
George remarked, "Wouldn't you know Nancy would have all the excitement?"
"That suits me," said Bess. "I get a good night's sleep and have nothing to worry about." Nancy went into the house to put on blue jeans, loafers, and a shirt so that she could help Bess and George clean the cage. It took them until late morning, and Bess declared that she was absolutely starved. "I hope Mrs. Beeling has a good lunch for us," she said, leading the way into the kitchen. Chicken salad with fresh tomatoes, and girls, look at that big chocolate cake." "Bess Marvin," George said severely, "you leave that chocolate cake alone. Every time you take off a few pounds, you put them right back on." Bess looked at the cake wistfully. Should she pay attention to George, who, she knew, was right, or should she enjoy the luscious dessert? To herself she said, "I won't decide now. Maybe, just maybe, I'll be satisfied with the chicken salad and a little bitsy piece of cake." This did not prove to be the case, and later, when Bess cut a slice for herself, it was so wide that even Miss Carter had to laugh. She eased the tension, however, by saying, "I've always felt the place to dine is in one's own home, not in someone else's." Bess beamed at her. "I could hug you for that, Miss Carter." After lunch, the actress was carried upstairs for her nap. The girls helped Mrs. Beeling with the luncheon dishes. Then the nurse said she would like to run downtown. "A kind neighbor across the street has offered to take me shopping. Will you girls please answer the phone and the doorbell?" "Yes, indeed," Nancy replied, and Bess added, "Bring home something special to eat, will you?" Mrs. Beeling laughed. When she had gone, Nancy suggested that the girls go to the basement once more to try to find out why the tapper had been there. "I'm sure he's hunting for something," she said, and reminded the others about the mysterious telephone call. "He may have meant secrets to do with this house." She led the way to the basement. The door to the kitchen was left open so they could hear anyone who might call. A second intensive search of the room was begun. Except for the occasional conversation among the girls, there was total silence in the house. They were investigating a far corner when Bess suddenly grabbed Nancy's arm. "I hear it," she said in a hushed voice. "The tapping! It's upstairs somewhere." On tiptoe, the girls dashed to the steps and rushed up to the kitchen. The end of chapter 5. We'll have to see